And you're good to go.
Hello and welcome to our March Inside the Author Studio interview. I am Sam Horn, and did you know today is Dr. Seuss's birthday? So let's celebrate the man, the legend, the enduring author whose books have been out making a difference in the world for more than 50 years. And Dr. Seuss said, "You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose." Well, our guest, Mike Wien, definitely has brains in his head. He definitely has feet in his running shoes, and he definitely steers himself in many directions that he chooses. In fact, tonight you'll find out how he was actually an executive with Frito-Lay, PepsiCo, and how he segued from that into turning his passion into his profession, how he has become a world championship athlete. In fact, that's not just a claim. Boy, he has backed it up with evidence. Just this year alone, he has won his age division in the Ironman triathlon, the New York Marathon, the Boston Marathon, and the Disney Marathon, all in 1 year. And he did it at a spry 70 years old. Now, he's going to be sharing his specific edge, which is the name of his book. And he'll be talking just about how he developed that subject, how he got clear that it was his competitive edge is to clarify his specific edge, and how it has led to peak performance for several decades now. Also, as a writer and an entrepreneur, what can we learn from Mike and his lessons learned about what our specific edge is, how we can turn our passion into our profession so we're making meaning and making money. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mike Wien.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you. And by the way, let me finish my green eggs and ham, and then I'll be ready.
Now, is that carbo loading or is that protein? Do you have a big race coming up, Mike?
It's actually both.
Yeah, see, there you go. In fact, you always have a big race. So just before we jump into your writing process and how your book is becoming evergreen, and it's been out for, oh, I'm sorry, another Dr. Seuss reference, how it's been selling for years and leading to paid keynotes, etc. What's something you've got coming up on your calendar you're really excited about?
Well, I guess the next thing is the Boston Marathon. I'm going back. That's really exciting. And I should mention, I think it's appropriate that I've been wearing my Boston Marathon shirt training, and it's the right colors, I think, for today. It's yellow and blue. And there's an awful lot of heroes carrying yellow and blue flags these days in our world.
Yes, well said, Mike, well said. So let's start on your entrepreneurial journey and put us back in the scene, because a specific edge has been out now for more than 8 years. So put us in the scene where you decided to stop waiting and start writing. Our good friend Dan Pointer once said, if you wait to write, you're not a writer, you're a waiter. So what motivated you to start writing your book?
Well, I think it's really simple. You know, I had a wonderful career in corporate America, and I was moving on. I started a consulting business after I left that. I started teaching at Georgia State, and I started speaking. And the speaking was really driven by the fact of combining this idea of marketing and getting a competitive advantage with the success I was having in the Ironman triathlons and that competition. And so the speech really evolved in having, really developed from using the Ironman as a metaphor to gain a competitive advantage. And as I was speaking, I realized that sort of maybe it was to add credibility or to have a leave behind, or even to use as a way to introduce myself. A book would be great. And so, it was appropriate for me, I think, to start developing and writing a book.
And now we're leaving something out, Mike, because I know about your story, and when you are featured in Runner's World or other magazines, often is that You mentioned that growing up, you were not a jock. You were not the kid, that was already a champion, that sometimes you were picked last for a team. So how did you go from that to being a world championship athlete? I know it has something to do with a specific edge, but tell us a little bit more about that transformation, please.
Sure. I'm not sure it was a transformation. It was more of a recognition of what my strengths were. Let's talk about what my strengths weren't.
Mhm.
I'm very poor at eye-hand coordination. So I'm also not very tall. I'm not very big, and I'm not very fast. But where I'm really strong is I've found out that I really have some really strong endurance. I'm a very good runner. And I think the combination of the two, a strong runner and strong endurance. And I started realizing that I was doing quite well in anything that involved endurance. I guess the last thing, which I'm very grateful for, is that I was aging more gracefully than most people. And so maybe I wasn't getting faster, but my competition was getting slower.
Now, Mike, we inside the author studio, everything is a metaphor for us. So a lot of times people take notes, they put a vertical line down the center. And if we're talking about now being a writer or an entrepreneur, if we follow your advice over on the left, we put very honestly what we're not good at. You said, okay, I am not tall, I am not fast. Over on the right is what I am good about. So as a writer, maybe we also are good at endurance. Maybe we don't, maybe we have a full life and we don't have time to write every single day, but Ben, we've been working on this and we will finish it. So how about one other from you, when you think about your specific edge that allows you to compete on a world-class level, one other thing you're bringing to the table that writers could perhaps apply to their projects?
Yeah, it's well, there's a couple things to be successful. One of the things I used to talk about is sustained effort wins.
Mhm.
It's picking yourself up when you have failures. And let me speak, Sam, if I may, to failures just a second.
Mhm.
I have become an expert at failures. I've had a lot of experience. And, one of the things I write about in the book is I was at Frito-Lay. And I think I'm known for two things at Frito-Lay. One, I introduced Fantastics in 1979. Fantastics was the biggest disaster in the history of Frito-Lay. Right after that, they gave me another product. They figured I had experience in my specific edge. I had new products, I knew marketing, and I knew the Frito-Lay distribution system. And they gave me another new product, and maybe you've heard of that. It's called Tostitos. Now, now here's the real awakening for me. People are much more interested to hear about Fantastics and how I handled that than they are about Tostitos and how I was successful.
See, you're bringing up something, Mike, as a speaker, because many of our authors speak as well. You are so right that when we come off the pedestal and we are honest and we fess up about our mistakes or our failures, that's often when we're relatable. And sometimes we learn more from those. And that's when people identify with us because they feel that we're not trying to be perfect. Is that what you have found as well?
Absolutely. Can I give you another example?
Let's do it.
I write blogs after my races. When I was 60, I took second in the world in the Ironman World Championships. And that was that would have been in 2011. In 2012, I ran the Ironman again, and I was 2 hours later, and I was 27th. All right. Now, I wrote two blogs. And I asked people, what blog do you think people enjoyed the most and what they learned from? And it was the second blog about how I handled that loss. And one of the things that I wrote about was, how it felt to finish 2 hours later. And I had 10 reasons why, that there was advantages. I'll just give you two. One was that, people at the finish line had been drinking for 2 more hours and they were much more excited to see me come across the line. But the second thing is, And it really is true. No matter what time you run down a Leahy Drive to the finish of the Ironman, it's still a thrill of a lifetime. Mm-hmm. And people, that was just so much better received than, how a kid from right field actually, took second in the world.
This is Kendra Ray, who is our project manager and who handles our dashboard and is just our tech wizard, listens for what pops out in our interviews. And I tell you, Kendra, you may be writing down that sometimes people resonate more with our failures than our successes, because what you just talked about, that blog, and how that is the one that people commented on and remembered and related to. That's a good insight.
Thanks.
Okay, now next question is that you and I talked in advance, and I know that you took a different route with your book. You're a busy man with your executive, with your racing, your training. So I know that you searched out for a writing partner to work with you on developing your book. Could you tell us a little bit about that process, please?
Sure. Well, you're being very kind, but part of the writing process is that I was excited about writing a book. I thought that the book should be loaded with examples, and I started collecting examples of how the Ironman would translate into success in business. Mm-hmm. And I even developed files, and then I developed an outline. And, I kept on doing this and gathering information and gathering wonderful stories. And, at one NSA meeting along the line, I ran into a lady by the name of Helen Chang from Authors Bridge. And she had a booth, and she stopped me and she asked a very simple question. She said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I said, yes, I'm writing one. And she said, well, how long have you been writing it? And I said, 4.5 years. And she said, well, what are you going to do different in the next 6 months to get it out? And I said, hire you. So, and that's exactly what I did. And the thing I would say about bringing in an expert, is that in this case, and I'm sure it's true in a lot of people, she was able to ask me questions and dig deeper into areas that I would have never thought of, and also capture my voice. And it was all done through interviews, and lo and behold, we ended up with a book.
Mike, see, once again, you're practicing what you teach, is that was a specific edge, right? You figured, wait a minute, I've spent 4.5 years on this book and it's not out in the world. That is not delivering results, right? And you're known for how can I get results and make things happen. And if that means partnering with someone, that was the difference between a book on the laptop and a book out in the world, huh?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. What surprised you about the process? I tell you, we've had an opportunity to talk with many people, and some people started off with a certain theme or premise, and that ended up not at all being the theme or the premise. Yeah. Some people thought they were going to do a memoir, and it ended up being prescriptive, or vice versa. What surprised you about this process of writing?
Well, I think that, well, first of all, it really started with me giving speeches. And I remember coming back from the World Championships, and I was asked to give a speech. And I asked someone to take a look at it at the beginning, and they said, gosh, it's a wonderful speech. It's something your mother would really love. And I spent the weekend rewriting it, because I realized that no, people had to take away not how good I was, but some learning. And I think that was an important part of the process of, and it's an important part of writing your book. You don't want to write a book, at least I don't have that great of a life that I have to, I want an autobiography. I wanted to write a book that people could see themselves in the book and be inspired by it. And that was a big takeaway. I think that but if I talked about the surprise of writing the book, I guess I wrote it because I wanted to get more credibility, and I underestimated the importance of that. I underestimated how people would view me differently as a writer, and not just as a casual speaker, and just someone who's doing it, speaking on the side, and that really surprised me. It's the same thing that when I was talking about my background, people were more impressed that I was a marketing professor in college than I was spent 28 years with companies like Frito-Lay, Pepsi, and Omni Hotels. And that was, it's really interesting that the perception that people have may not be the same as the perception you have.
Isn't what you're bringing up is something that we've discussed in our Stop Wishing, Start Writing community, is that if we crowdsource our content, people will tell us what's resonating with them, and it may not have been what we anticipated, right?
Right.
There may be something else about our story or about our process or about our work, and that is what they are finding most inspiring and useful. Which brings up another question. I know you do a lot of speaking, especially in the franchise world and so forth. Now, the logistics of, do most of your clients buy a copy of your book for every member? Gone are the days where we sell back of the room, pre-COVID, et cetera. But how do you handle that process of making your book available to your speaking clients?
Yeah, Sam, when I first published the book, I went to the back of the room and sold it and autographed it and all that good stuff. And I tried to have someone handle the cash or the credit cards or all that. That's just not me. And I was uncomfortable with it. And yes, I'd love to sell the books, but basically, when I give speeches, I very much encourage the person who's hiring me, and I included in the price, a book for everyone. And it's really fun because, of course, I use my book as an incentive because I want highly interactive sessions. And I give books out during the session to people who are speaking up. And maybe 10% of the people get books. And at the end, then I announce that, whoever sponsored the speech has agreed to buy books for all of you. And I'll be at the back of the room with a pile of books, signing them for you at the end. And that just, to me, was just so much more comfortable. And I loved signing, not collecting any money. And everybody loved getting a book.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into the weeds about that. Does the client do a bulk order from Amazon? Do you order from Ingram and have them shipped, et cetera? So what's the actual logistics of them buying them, shipping them, and having them ready when you show up? Or these days doing a virtual engagement? How do you handle that?
The virtual engagement is next to impossible. And I have not been doing many virtual speeches. I love the interaction.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But I have been in, and I don't, I tell people to go to Amazon if they want a book. Mm-hmm. But as far as, you're also getting into another important question, is the decision of, do you self-publish or not? All right. So the answer for me is very simple. I self-published. And it's very easy for me to go to the printer, tell them to print a certain number of books and ship them to a certain hotel or a certain location. And they're there sitting there. And it's also gives me an opportunity, because I'm self-published, that, it's much cheaper for me to buy books. And I do give a good discount to, someone who's going to buy 300-400 books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for our audience, because we have such a range, I'll give you an example. Let's talk about the Someday book right here. So this, as a hardback, it's what, $25? I can get it from my publisher for, I don't know, probably 10 or 12 bucks wholesale. But see, then they would charge me shipping. They would charge shipping. So by the time you ship like 300 books somewhere, that's going to add at least $2 or $3 a book. So for a $25 book, the cost of buying it from my publisher at my wholesale rate and adding shipping comes out about $15. Guess what? You can probably buy this on Amazon right now for $14, no shipping. So furthermore, buying from Amazon goes to your account as a publisher, which means that not only does it go directly to my book sales, it goes directly to the royalties that I earn. So for many people who are published by a major publisher, it's still advantageous to ship books from Amazon, goes to your account, you get royalty, no shipping, and the cost, wholesale cost, is about the same. So Go ahead. You were going to say something, Mike.
No, that's neat information. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, now let's, and by the way, I've got two more questions and then we open it up because our group always loves to tap into your expertise, your epiphanies, your experience. So you're welcome to put comments in chat and Kendra will call on you and you can ask Mike your question, or when the time comes, you can put your hand up and she will see you and call on you as well. So next question is, we were talking about crowdsourcing and that often there is one idea from a book that seems to be the one that is most popular. Stephen Covey got a 2-book deal and his publisher said, so what's your second book? And he said, I'll tell you after the first book comes out, because we've got 7 habits, we'll see which one of those resonates with people. And that will be my second book. And that was First Things First. So back to your book. What is that one idea that everyone seems to love, that you hear about the most? What is that?
I think that the whole thing is the idea of gaining a competitive advantage, or like we like to refer to it as a specific edge, when 3 things come together. We've already mentioned one. When they gave me Tostitos, it was because I had new product experience, marketing experience, and I understand the Frito-Lay distribution system. The triathlon, listen, I'm now a very strong runner. I'm an above average biker and I'm an okay swimmer. But when you put the 3 of those together, I'm world class. And really the question is not only for your marketing or you as an individual, as a writer, what are the 3 things that come together that make you unique, or make your book unique, or make your story unique? And I think that's what had the greatest, resonance with people. Sam, why I'm talking about specific edge, it would be inappropriate for me not to mention that I came up with that concept by using my marketing consultant. Even I'm a marketing expert, but I have a marketing consultant. And I know you're smiling because my marketing consultant is Sam Horn. And one of the great things you gave me is those 2 words, specific edge. And I'll be ever indebted to you for that idea. So thank you.
Thank you. Mike, you're showing me the grace that you show your wife, Nanette, who is your #1 supporter and team. She goes with you to every single race and she's there with the water, with the food, with the splits, etc. So thank you for that. And let's unpack that for a second, Mike, because our goal is, if we, George Washington Carver said, if you can do a common thing in an uncommon way, you will command the attention of the world. And I remember our conversation. You're in marketing, so the word competitive edge, competitive advantage is out there. And to try and build a career just on how to create a competitive edge, we're competing with a lot of people. We did not give ourselves a competitive edge. So I remember we were very clear that we needed your terminology for that in order to come up with a new word, something that people hadn't heard before. They understood it. It made sense. It worked in terms of getting results. And I remember you talking, we were unpacking it. So Mike, how is it if you figure you're not so fast, or you're short, or you're what, and you just kept saying, well, I look for something specific I can do that no one else is doing. I look for a specific coach in this who's the go-to expert on this. You just kept using the word specific. Ergo, competitive edge became a specific edge, which became a one-of-a-kind title and concept that you own because you created it.
And thank you very much for that.
You bet. Hey, so one more question before we turn it out to people. Many of the people who are part of our calls are somewhere in the process. And as you know, initially it took you 4.5 years. It can take a long time. And, just like, when you're in the middle of a triathlon and the wind is in your face in Kona in that black lava desert, or, you're running and you've got, pain, or you've got a bad knee or something like that. What keeps you going? And what is your advice about, as authors, how we can keep going when metaphorically the wind is in our face.
Yeah. I want to quote an author that I really like, Simon Sinek. And the title of his book is Start with Why. And it's really, why are you doing these things that you're doing? And for me, the why is finally, it's about having an impact on others. It is about being a role model. It is about showing people that, success sometimes, success is best attained by those who can turn obstacles, failures, and disappointments into learning experiences for moving forward. And, I have had a lot of learning experiences in my life. It's about, turning, the old cliche is turning lemons into lemonade. And so, even if I'm having a bad race, even if I get stung by a bee and my lip swells up, which happened in Wisconsin, and there's wonderful pictures of that. You keep moving forward, and people get a lot out of that. And I honor and respect the fact that I've been fortunate enough to become a role model for so many people in just chasing dreams, having dreams and going after them.
So see, Mike, you don't just give you don't give this lip service, you give this heart service, because I know, was it a couple years ago that you had kind of a bad crash on a bike? And please tell us what happened. And once again, part of your specific edge is this mindset to keep going, even when it's against the odds, even when it's hard, even when it's not fun, even when there's no guaranteed results. So please put us back in that event and how you pulled yourself back up and got out there back on the trails again.
Yeah. Well, I had fallen. I ran into the back tire of someone else's bike, my fault. And I went down hard. I fractured my pelvis. All right. Somehow I got back on my bike and rode another 20 miles before I said, this isn't going to work. And someone picked me up and took me to the hospital. And I wasn't walking for 8 weeks. What kept me going is a couple things. One, I had a short-term goal. 8 weeks after I did that, my son got married, and I was going to walk down the aisle, come hell or high water. And I was also going to dance with my new daughter-in-law. And even though I had a cane in one hand and I had my arm wrapped around my son in the other, I walked down that aisle. And I also hung on to my daughter-in-law, and we danced. And so I had a short-term goal. But one of the things that really kept me going is that the doctor said, Mike, this is an injury that's going to heal itself. You're going to have to be patient, and you will be back competing in world championships in a year. And, that's all I needed to hear. And, that, hey, this wasn't, this was short-term setback. And that's all I needed to hear. And, that kept me going.
I really hope that all of us think about our writing project, and we think about our version of a wedding in, was it 8 weeks, did you say?
8 weeks.
8 weeks. Okay. In 8 weeks, what could be a short-term goal that we do with our writing project? Maybe it's a blog we put up on LinkedIn. Maybe it's a little YouTube video that we do about a story from one of our chapters. Something, though, that gets our project off the laptop and out in the world where we can get feedback and celebrate it and have tangible evidence that what we're doing is going to make a difference. And then a long-term goal, like you did, is put a date on the calendar when that book will be finished, or when we do give that TEDx talk, or so that we have short-time goals and long-time goals to keep us moving forward, in your words.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to hear questions from our group. So Kendra, over to you. Who has put a comment in chat or has raised their hand and would like to ask a question, please?
It looks like Mason has a question.
Okay, Mason, let's hear from you, Mason.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back again. Mike, I had the good fortune to hear you with Sam earlier, or sometime last year, I think it was. and you were inspiring then, and you are now. So my question, however, is, as you
And
talk
thank you
about,
for coming back.
well, I wasn't going to miss it. Actually, I try not to miss anything Sam does, but especially because I enjoyed it last time. I said, let me continue learning. But my question is, as we look at, and I admire that your failures, you recognize your failures resonate more frequently with others than the successes. I found that as well. But if you think back to some of the failures and how you handled them as a younger person, what might you change now with the added wisdom that as to how you would handle those today? So this is kind of like advice for somebody younger, somebody we
Yeah.
might be mentoring, for example.
Yeah, I think that, while I look back at those failures today, and, sort of smile and recognize that they were a wonderful learning experience, I was devastated by some of them. And, it took me a little while to recover. And whether that was losing a job or whether that was, I have a whole host of them. I can tell you about Zambinos at Frito-Lay, and I can tell you about sesame seed Doritos, which, by the way, we were so far ahead of our time. That was the problem with that. But, as I look back, I realize now that they were really terrific learning experiences, helped me in development. And I think that would be the main thing, is that, just focus on how serious it is. It isn't fatal. Just like my pelvis, wasn't something that would debilitate me from competing, and then move on, learn from it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Kendra, who else has a comment or has raised their hands, please?
Yep, next we have Ariel.
Ariel.
Thank you, Mike. My question is around, you mentioned being an educator, professor, and then you just shared some stories about the wedding and the injury that you went through, some of the failures, and I got very inspired and very emotional. And so as an educator, I'm curious about when you feel perhaps some tension between education versus inspiration, or how you kind of mingled the two of those for your writing.
Yeah, well, I think they're related. I think that they're weaved in together. It really is education and inspiration. You're having an impact on people. That's what brings it together. Let me tell you a little bit about where I taught. I taught at Georgia State University. All right. That is a school that it best describes is about 50% of the students in my class were first generation going to college. All right. Most of them were working part-time. And, the skills that I was teaching them in marketing, and it was in the hospitality school, are skills that were going to change their lives. And that's what motivated me. And so, hopefully that's really a blend of, inspiring and educating. And that's, that's the way I viewed my students. That's why I was passionate about teaching, and because I was making a difference. And hopefully I'm still making a difference in giving speeches and being a role model. Thanks for the question.
And your blogs too, Mike, because your blogs are not just a chronicle of what happened in this particular race. They're always shout outs. They're shout outs to the volunteer. They're shout outs to your Timex team or something like that. So you really role model for people gracious generosity in your writing in a way that educates and inspires. So, Kendra, how about another comment, question? Someone raised hand, please.
I actually had a question.
Let's hear.
Yeah. You mentioned that, Mike, your book is 7-ish years old. What do you think? Sounds like you still get speaking opportunities and things like that from it. What do you think was your kind of secret sauce that you put in the book that made it kind of have legs, if you will? I just do these for myself, right, Sam? What makes it withstand the test of time, right? And you're still getting speaking opportunities and things from it today.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that there's a lot of examples there. They're timeless. That there are a lot of takeaways that people can use. It's a I hope it's an entertaining book. It's an interesting book when you talk about the Iron Man and you talk about eating 4,000 calories in 12 hours when your heart rate is still going at 130, 140. And then applying that, I just think that there's some, really, it's a fun book to read. I also call it a one flight book. It's 112 pages, and anything longer than 2 hours on an airplane, you should be able to get through with it. So it's a fun read. Yeah.
And isn't that nice positioning for business readers is, we're not doing as much flying as we used to. However, speaking at conventions and conferences and your events are all around the world. So to deliberately describe it as it's a one flight book is right in alignment with your target demographics, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Sam, I'm one of those that's very optimistic. I look at the trends on COVID and where things are going and the number of people who are vaccinated and the number of people who have had COVID. And I think we're going to be back traveling soon and speaking in front of live audiences.
Well, that's from your lips to God's ears, Mike. So, and I've got another question too, Mike, is that, let's bookend this by referencing Dr. Seuss. His birthday is again today. And of course, one of his favorite books and one-liners is, "Oh, the places you will go." And when I think about my books and the places I've gone because of my books, the people that I've met, I've had a chance to speak on world cruises. I've had a chance to speak at the Asian Leadership Conference in Korea with Jack Ma of Alibaba and, fantastic people. And so tell us the places your book has taken you and the people you've met because of getting your work out in the world.
Yeah. Well, maybe my favorite, because I'm a skier, is the French Alps. I had to give a speech in the French Alps once, and then it was terrible. I had to ski with the participants afterwards and talk about the book on the chairlift. I'm not sure who should have paid who, but that may have been one of my favorites. And then there's another one that certainly stands out. And that is that I have been a regular speaker to the Canadian club managers. One of the wonderful things about that is they host their meetings at the private clubs. And I'm talking about, the private golf clubs and yacht clubs. And with all of these general managers, they all go out, the host club goes out to impress and show off their fellow peers. And one of the things I love to do, and it's maybe why I exercise so much, is I love to eat. And, I tell people, I'm 5'7" and 5'6" really, and 135 pounds, but I need to eat 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day just because of, the exercise. So I appreciate good food, and I appreciate going to country clubs where the club manager is trying to show off to all of his peers.
Well, you just brought up an interesting point. Kendra had referenced that your book is an evergreen, that it's still generating business, that it's still selling, it's still relevant, etc. And you brought up that they bring you back over and over again. And I really hope that our authors on the call are understanding that when we write a book, it's not a one-off. We don't speak for a group and then that's it. They've had us speak on that book, so it's a one-time speaking engagement. They bring you back again and again. And do you customize the message according to their theme that year, or according to what's going on in their industry, or talk about a different aspect of the book you didn't cover the first time? How do you get repeated speaking engagements from the same client?
The club managers is an easy one. It's different club managers.
There you go.
Okay, so that's an easy one. But yes, I've had an opportunity, particularly in the franchise area, to come back. And I focus on different things, but also in a lot of my speeches, I come from a marketing background, not a speaking background.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I will do is go in and study the company and figure out what their specific edge is and figure out what some of the tools they're using to communicate that. And I'll incorporate that in the speech and, really inspire them to leverage what their franchisor is providing to them. And so, yes, the speech can be adjusted. And it's, for me, it's easy to focus on then one specific item. For instance, if your specific edge is service, and most of my speeches are to service companies, then I can, really focus on how you make service your specific edge.
That goes back to Ariel's question about education and inspiration. And by you researching and doing your homework about the company and then figuring out what their special edge is, you're educating and you're inspiring and customizing it all at the same time, right?
Yes. And let me just tell you one thing that's funny, especially with the club managers or something like that. Each one has a country club. Each one has a specific edge, each country club. And so I've been known to go in advance. I get the list of all the club managers. I take a look at their clubs. I go out to the internet and figure out what each club is, what their specific edge is. And then all of a sudden I start presenting that as part of the presentation. Boy, does that get their attention.
Well done. Well done. Well, Mike, we like to wrap up our interview is that sometimes we've had authors who have written one book and they're done. This book is an evergreen. It does drive a lot of business. They said what they wanted to say. And other people, they're not even halfway through their first book when they're already thinking about their next book. So do you have a next book that you're working on or thinking about now?
I have a next book that I've been thinking about for 5 years. And it's about service. I spent a number of years as the head of marketing for Omni Hotels Worldwide, and I think one of the things that's really out there is the difference in service is empowerment, and that's one area that I wanted to delve into. But frankly, I know from a physical standpoint, I don't look and act like I'm 70, but from a business standpoint, I'm doing more running, biking, and swimming these days than consulting or speaking, and really enjoying life. So empowerment, that concept may become a speech or it may become an article, but I'm not sure it's going to be a book.
Isn't that Chris Rock was asked what it was like being really wealthy. And he said, money doesn't guarantee happiness. You know what it guarantees? Options. So it sounds like you have nice options now to focus on your athletic career and your sons. And didn't you just go cross-country skiing with your sons and their kids?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was downhill skiing.
There you go.
It really, it's maybe a good area to close on. We talk about, what's your goals? I had a long-term goal, and it was a goal that I came up with. It was 30 years ago, and it was a real simple goal. And that is that I wanted to be I wanted to be able to be in shape when I was 70, that I could ski through the trees in deep powder with my boys. And my boys are now 35 and 31. They're outstanding skiers. And over the holidays, the three of us skied through the trees at Steamboat. And, I can still ski down everything. And people ask me, what keeps me going to stay in the kind of shape, world-class shape that I'm in? And that was my long-term goal. And now my goal is I want to be able to ski with my grandson, who's now 1.5, when I'm 80.
Well, I tell you, you are right. That is a wonderful place to wrap up. It's Kendra is going to be putting your information up in our community so people can check out your website. They can find out more about your incredible contributions. And we really want to thank you, Mike. It is, whether it's short-term goals, long-term goals, whether it is being crystal clear about how we can turn our passion into our profession in a way that makes a difference. And that's a win for all. You're a walking, talking example of it.
Thanks. If I could say one last thing.
Please.
You said that people can contact me. I'm one of those people that really wants to help people. So if there's anybody out here that would like to continue this conversation, I'm going to give you a very easy email address that Sam helped create. It's mike@specificedge.com. And feel free to reach out, and I'd love to help.
Well, there's that gracious generosity in action, Mike. So I want to invite our group to join us next time, next Tuesday, March 8th. We're going to be having our book club, and we'll be discussing James Clear's really, truly excellent book, Atomic Habits. I have been writing books, helping to develop books and reading nonfiction books professionally for 30 years now. And his is one of the best nonfiction books I've ever read. It has such a diversity of real life examples. It has such memorable, actionable insights. It's absolutely brilliant. And of course, we're going to be talking about not just his book and what resonated with us, it's how we can become a person who writes. We can adopt this habit of writing and getting our work out in the world. So once again, please, a round of applause to Mike Wien, our guest on Inside the Author Studio. And Kendra will put that very easy to remember email in our community. And we'll see you on March 8th for our program on our book club with Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you, Kendra, for helping pull this all together.
Bye for now, and write on.